אוקיי, שלום לכולם, אנחנו מתנצלים על העיכוב. ג'רון לנייר מאחר לנו מעט, הוא יגיע עוד מעט, הוא בדרך, ויש לנו פה הרבה מאוד קהל ערב, מאוד משמח, ועוד 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 אנשים נכנסים, אז אנחנו שנייה נחכה שעוד אנשים ייכנסו.
עוד 100 אנשים נכנסים.
אז אנחנו נעשה את פתיחה קצת שונה ממה שתכננו. שלום, אהלן, ערב טוב. שמי אורי סוכרי, אני מרצה בבצלאל, אני מהמחלקה לתקשורת חזותית וממרכז ההוראה, שזה מרכז פנים בצלאלי שמארח את האירוע הזה הערב. ביחד איתי נמצאת דוקטור רומי מיקולינסקי. שלום רומי, תעשי שלום. שהולכת לדבר עם ג'רון לנייר, שמגיע אלינו ממש בקרוב, אנחנו מקווים, ובדרך. אני אפתח בהסבר מהיר על מה זה הערב הזה, ומה זה הדבר הזה, מה זו הסדרה הזאת שאנחנו עושים פה. אז הסדרה הזאת נולדה במקור בתור פרויקט של המרכז להוראה, בבצלאל, ובלעדיה זה לא יכול להיות. אני קודם כל רוצה להודות לכל האנשים של המרכז שנמצאים איתנו הערב, שזה מורן זרחי, אורי יקותיאל, ברק פלמן, ליאת בריקס אתגר ומרב סולומון. ומעט הסבר על מה זה הדבר הזה. אז המוטיבציה העיקרית שלנו למפגשים הללו, וזה המפגש השלישי במספר, האורחים הקודמים היו יאניס ורפקיס, שהיה שר האוצר היווני, השני במחלוקת. השני היה לפני שבוע דאגלס רשקוף. השלישי היום יהיה ג'רון לנייר. המוטיבציה שלנו במפגשים האלה היא מתוך מחשבה שלנו כקהילה של אומנים ומעצבים, בתוך האקדמיה לעיצוב, לנסות להתייחס למה שהיה הקורונה, ועכשיו זה כבר הולך ועוזל מאיתנו ונגמר עד בארץ, במקומות אחרים זה עדיין בעיצומו, המגפה עדיין בעיצומה. להתייחס לרגע הזה המאוד ייחודי שנוצר, בתור רגע שיש בו אפשרות לנסות להבין את האפשרות שיש לנו לשנות דברים, לנסות להבין מגמות עכשוויות בוערות שקורות, מתוך הנקודה שבה נעשתה עצירה מסוימת בעולם, ראינו את הכלכלה נעצרת, ראינו דברים שאי אפשר היה לעלות על הדעת עד לא מזמן קורים, וכחלק מהדבר הזה ראינו גם הרבה מאוד מפגשים של אנשים בזום, שמתחילים לפגוש ולדבר ומנסים to make sense מהמצב הנוכחי, וניסינו יותר להבין את הדבר הזה על ידי זה שאנחנו מזמינים את חלק מהאנשים האלה, התחלנו לפנות בצלאל, התחלנו לפנות לאנשים בזום, ולשמחתנו העיינות הייתה מאוד מאוד גבוהה. כל האנשים שהיו בסדרה ואנשים אחרים שעדיין צפויים להגיע, כולם שמחו מאוד להגיע ולדבר. ההתייחסות שלנו לנושא הזה הייתה, כאילו נוצר איזה חלל בזמן, איזה קרע, איזה פורטל, שאנחנו יכולים דרכו להבין הרבה מאוד דברים מההתחלה. העיסוק שלנו מאוד קשור לכלכלה ולתרבות דיגיטלית. אלה הדברים שהם לא דברים שלרוב אנחנו מתעסקים בהם בתוך האקדמיה, בתור אומנים או בתור מעצבים, אבל אנחנו בהחלט רואים שהדבר הזה הפתיע אותנו כמות העיינות, גם של הסטודנטים, גם של המרצים, וגם של הציבור הרחב. העיינות שלכם היא מהממת ולא צפויה. אנחנו שמחים שיש רעב כזה. רומי, תרצי קצת לספר לנו אולי על, אחרי שסיפרתי קצת על המוטיבציה של הסדרה כולה, לספר לנו קצת על האורח שמגיע אלינו הערב?
שמחה. אז אני אגיד שכשאורי שאל אותי את מי אני רוצה לראיין, ושאנחנו מכירים את האג'נדה של ליצור איזושהי שיחה מולטי-דיסציפלינרית, שלא בהכרח אנשים מעולם העיצוב והאמנות ידברו אל קהילת העיצוב והאמנות, והטכנולוגיה שאנחנו מייצרים כאן בבצלאל, אז מיד אמרתי ג'רון לנייר ושושנה זובוב, שגם היא תתארח כאן בעוד כמה שבועות. וג'רון לנייר הוא אדם מאוד לא קונבנציונלי, עם סיפור חיים מטורף, וגישה מאוד שונה לאופן שבו אנחנו מתייחסים לטכנולוגיה. כאילו מצד אחד, הוא עובד בעולמות ה-VR כבר 30-40 שנה, בעצם משנות ה-80, עוד מעט נראה אולי סרט קצר בזמן שאנחנו עדיין ממתינים לו, ומצד שני הוא כותב סרטים ספרים מאוד ביקורתיים ומאמרים מאוד מאוד נוקבים נגד האופן שבו הטכנולוגיה משנה אותנו, שהוא כל הזמן דורש להתייחס אל הצד האנושי, אל הצד היומיין, כמו שהוא קורא לזה. אני חושבת שהדרישה שלו לשמור על ההומניות, על כבוד עצמי, לקרוא לשיתופיות ולקולקטיביזם הזה, משהו שיש בו הרבה מאוד פסול, התחילה מאוד מוקדם. זאת אומרת שבתור אחד האנשים שבנו את היסודות של העולם החדש הזה, הוא גם היה מהיר לזהות את הקושי בו. ב-2006 כבר הוא כתב על דיגיטל מאואיזם, על האופן שבו הכל נראה אותו דבר, הכל שווה. ויקיפדיה והתנ"ך זה אותו דבר, הערך הוא זה. אחרי זה הוא התקדם לכתוב עוד ביקורות על תרבות ה-2.0, Web 2.0, שבעצם מרוששת אותנו מהעקרונות שאפשר לקרוא לזה כבוד, אפשר לקרוא לזה גאווה, אפשר לקרוא לזה מקצועיות, שבעצם אנשים כמוני, כמוכם, אנשים שמתפרנסים מההשכלה שלהם, מהיצירתיות שלהם, מוצאים את עצמם ללא פרנסה, כי כולם יוצרים. והוא כתב על זה מכל מיני כיוונים, גם מעולמות ה-virtual reality, גם בהקשרים של ממש הבסיס של הטכנולוגיה, ואני חושבת שהספר שלו, You're Not a Gadget, שהוא בין 10 שנים השנה, הנה אורי מחזיק אותו, יש לו גם הקדשה שם, הוא יוכל להשוויץ תכף, הוא בעצם סוג של מניפסט וגם קריאת הערה או עזרה לתרבות שלנו היום, שמתרוששת מנכסיה ונותנת לטכנולוגיה לשנות אותנו יתר על המידה. עכשיו, מה זה אומר יתר על המידה? זה אומר לאבד את המצפן החברתי האנושי שלנו, ולאפשר לפלטפורמות להפוך להיות גם אלו שמייצרות את התוכן. זאת אומרת שאם בהתחלה הייתה איזושהי תקווה, איזשהו חזון להתאחדות, לשמחת חיים, ליצירתיות, לחופש, אנחנו מגלים יותר ויותר, וזה נכון גם היום, 2020, אפילו יותר מתמיד, שאותן פלטפורמות שנועדו לאפשר לנו להיות קהילות, להיות אנשים שרוצים להיות ביחד, להיות מחוברים, שאותן פלטפורמות מצד אחד גם מרוששות אותנו, כי אנחנו עובדים בהן ולא מתפרנסים, וגם גורמות לפרגמנטציה מאוד מאוד גדולה בחברה. והדברים האלה הטרידו אותו משלב ממש מוקדם, האופן שבו הטכנולוגיה משפיעה על המרקם החברתי, האופן שבו המציאות נתפסת ונבנית, וזה גם אדם שמעניין להסתכל עליו ביחס לקריירה שלו, לדעות החריפות שלו, כי מצד אחד הוא בתוך הממסד, הוא גם בנה אותו, הוא מכר חברה לאתרי מאוד מאוד מוקדם, כבר בתחילת ה-90s, והיום הוא עובד במייקרוסופט ריסרצ'. אז איך אתה יכול להיות גם ביקורתי וגם להיות חלק מהמכונה, חלק מהביג פייב, זה אחת השאלות שאני רוצה לשאול אותו היום, לכשהוא יגיע.
Hello, John. Can you please say hello?
Oh, yeah. Hey. Hello.
Hello. All right.
I think we should clap our hands.
Oh, no, you don't have to do that.
Hi, welcome.
Well, there are a lot of you. Okay.
All
Lots
right.
of Israelis.
Lots of Israelis.
Hey, okay. Well,
thank you for joining us. So I'm Romy, and I will interview you tonight. And there was a little mishap with the time of our date, but you made it. So it's really exciting for us to have you.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So I'm embarrassed to have to ask. Because I had thought, I didn't realize this was going to be now. What kind of school is this? What's your subject? This is
an art and design school, and we
art
also
and design. Okay.
Fantastic.
Okay. Great. All right.
So but wait, let me also explain. This is an open conversation. We also have technologists in the audience and people that are active in the VR field, and also friends that are from the AI and the ML world. So we have really a mix of interesting people active in both culture, technology, and Israel is a really small place. So everybody tends to mix with and to know everyone. And we already have some really good questions from the audience. But
I was trying to, I had a funny thing I was going to show you before, but I couldn't get into the meeting. We had a Seder over Zoom, and one of our cats came up and became obsessed with matzah. So now this cat is always demanding to eat matzah. So I was going to bring this cat and feed a cat matzah for you because I thought that would be funny. But now he's gone, but maybe he'll show up again. So you'll just have to believe me.
We do, and we're celebrating Shavuot, Pentecost, tomorrow. So it's the cheese and wine holiday. So maybe he also likes cheese. And
he might. I mean, obviously he was adopted because he's a different species, but he seems to be taking to Jewish traditions very well. So actually, there's some who think that the domesticated cat originated in Israel or in
Egypt, maybe.
Well, that's one theory, but there's some geneticists who think it actually was maybe more in Israel. Anyway, according to some science documentary that was on TV in the United States, so that means it's probably wrong. I don't know, but
we'll find out. Okay,
yeah, you can look into that.
We will. So may I jump in and ask you?
Okay, so I should start talking. Can I start with a mild complaint that's actually relevant?
Of course, it's your stage.
When I joined, in order to join this meeting, I saw something that I haven't seen before, which is there's a landing page probably set up by your institution where you have to go through the CAPTCHA game in order to join.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand the need to remove bots, but also the CAPTCHA game is a way of getting free labor from people for Google to tag their software for driving. And I find that objectionable. People aren't informed of it. They don't understand that they're working for free for a big company. And there's also something, it bothers me because it sets up on many, many levels. It bothers me that there's this idea that the people who contribute the examples and the preferences and the templates and the patterns and all of that make AI programs possible are treated as being almost like not worth talking to, not worth explaining things to. They're just treated like robots themselves. There's something about that bothers me a great deal. And it also, so it sets up a whole philosophy of the world and what machines are and what people are that bothers me, but also just the exploitation given the scale that it happens. I don't know how many times people play a CAPTCHA in a day, but it could be 1 billion or something. It's like a lot. It adds up to a lot of exploitation. That's a lot of labor that's being treated as free instead of paid that has to have some kind of effect on the global economy on a practical level. So I just really hate it. I just really, really hate it. So anyway, there must be other ways to detect bots that don't involve free labor for Google. The guy who started CAPTCHA is somebody I know and has renounced it for these reasons. I think most people, once they've actually lived with this, even if they did it, start to feel bad about it. Is this working? The screen has frozen for me.
Yeah, it's working. We hear you very well.
Oh, okay, marvelous. Okay.
I think, Romy, you're here, you're back. We might have lost Romy for a second.
Oh, we lost Romy. Okay. Maybe CAPTCHA decided she was a robot or something.
It's part of Zoom, by the way. It's not part of our institution, so it's part of the
I've never seen it on Zoom before. Maybe it's regional or something. I haven't used Zoom all that much. But anyway, yeah, but there's this funny thing where you're supposed to prove you're not a robot by acting like a robot, being exploited like a robot. It's something very horrible. There's a horrible message there. Somebody says that I got a message, CAPTCHA was developed at the Weizmann Institute. Well, there's this other guy who has a patent on it in the US who claims to have done it and has a startup. I don't know. The concept might have been developed. The thing as we know it apparently was not. Although, I don't know, maybe. Israel has been a little AI crazy. I don't know. I'll find out though. I'm actually curious about that.
You're checking it now.
What?
You're checking
in
it
our hold on a second.
John, while you're checking it, we have before Romy will be back, we have I think a very good question for you from the audience, from Shlomi Azulai.
Yes, and I should actually speak about. So we believe in the United States that somebody named Louis von Ahn developed CAPTCHA, sold it to Google, has a patent on it. Was Louis at Weizmann when I don't know. Anyway, these things are impossible to untangle. I get about 30 emails a day from people who have some claim or another in some tech or thing, not necessarily related to me, that they want me to help them. So I don't know, it's very hard to attribute these things. So there was a question, yes.
There was a question which is a very good one. One of Shlomi Azulai, which is from our audience, said, after watching some of your YouTube interviews, I decided to disconnect from Facebook. It was about 2 years ago, but I feel that I am the only one. Why is that?
That's really funny. Well,
I have a book about it.
I mean, it's look. This is, when the word, this is actually, it's not just about social media or technology. A general question for our time is, what is the most useful way to do anything when the world's gone crazy? Right? And this is a problem that Jews in particular have faced many times. And you can protest, you can make art, you can fight, you can do all of those things. And there's no perfect answer, though, because when the world goes crazy, it's a powerful force. And right now, it seems to me that the world is pretty crazy. I mean, in the United States now, if you wear a face mask in public, you can be attacked by people who think that it represents a political ideology. That's kind of crazy. I mean, surely that's crazy, right? So what do you do when the world is crazy? And I think what you do is, as I say in the book, I mean, I don't demand that people drop off their social media. I think it has to be a personal decision, and I don't claim to know what's right for you or for any particular person. I think what I can ask of everyone is to try to think as consciously and seriously as possible about what they can do that is the most true to themselves and the most useful and the least, and in a way not just be lazy and fall into the assignment given to them by big corporation. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I think especially during this time of the pandemic, actually, the interesting thing during the pandemic, and I don't know that anybody's gathered data on this to talk about it objectively, but there's a very strong anecdotal sense that the way people are using the internet, digital connectivity, has shifted, and that there's a little bit less of the thing that I hate the most, which is sitting there being told what to do by an algorithm. Like, this is your feed, take your feed. This is what you'll be interested in on Instagram or whatever. Instead of just accepting the feed, people seem to be making appointments with each other and meeting over video or in other ways. And so my sense is that the internet's actually gotten better during the pandemic, which I guess wouldn't be that surprising.
May I jump in and ask a question, actually, about the internet getting better? So I wanted to ask you about the social technology impact on our life, especially when it comes to this new understanding of reality, now that we spend much more time at home. So we may think that the internet got better, but in a sense, it got much stronger grip over us. And I'm not sure if the internet got better or if reality got worse, in a sense.
Yeah, I know, it's hard to say.
So scary for some people to go outside. So irritating to have, the need to meet people again because people are afraid of catching the disease or experiencing some inconveniences. So now when maybe the thing we need most is trust, maybe the internet seems to be safe again, but is it? I wonder what you think about that.
Well, I mean, despite my comfort with sharing very strong opinions and warnings, I'm actually very much an optimist, and I'm always trying to look for signs that things might be better, and I always like to leap on any potential thing that's better, and so therefore I try to find what's good in this. But if I wanted to talk about the pessimistic angle, it certainly is there. I mean, at the most fundamental level, there's this question of whether technology removes people from reality. And as if anybody's read my writing on virtual reality, I always thought that the fundamental purpose of virtual reality was to give people a point of comparison to appreciate reality better. That is to say, for instance, when you take off a headset, you perceive reality afresh for a few moments. There's a very special moment when you start to notice how fine-grained and remarkable reality is. And I think that moment of leaving virtuality is the very best thing about virtuality. That's what I always cherish the most. And so at any rate, the problem with the internet as it has been is that it has tended to create incentives for people to try to get power, attention, influence, or to be able to disrupt the power and influence of others. Instead, and that set of incentives has been so powerful that it's separated humanity a little bit more from reality. Now, what you have to be fair here. It's not like humanity has been consistently sane and wonderful. Humanity has been horrible periodically for thousands of years. So it's not like all the horrible things, all the stupidities of our era aren't new. But there is something different. There is a shift. I'll give you some examples. There's a thing going on. The character of those who become powerful, those who become leaders, is different than it used to be. If you go back before the internet to figures who became very powerful, they tended to exude a feeling of being invulnerable, of not being insecure. They were very secure. They were untouchable. The Stalin meant man of steel. These are, there was this idea that if they are ever sensitive, they try not to show it. And even the ones who are a little more emotional in public sometimes always try to exude the sense of invulnerability. But in this social media age, it's kind of reversed. And you have a lot of politicians in the world who really behave like little children, who seem to be very public about their feelings of insecurity. Somebody just sent more information about this origins of CAPTCHA thing. Okay, I'll look at it. In the United States, our President Trump does behave in a way that's very childlike. He'll, say things that are the sorts of, he'll say, well, this person likes me, this other one doesn't like me, this person was nice to me, I'm going to be nice to that. For instance, he's told our states that they need to say nice things about him if they want to receive aid related to the virus. It's just like a very childish thing. So it's hard to imagine leaders from an earlier era doing that. And I think that's because I actually knew Trump a little bit way before social media started. And he wasn't like that before. I think his Twitter addiction has gotten him into this childlike state, but it works politically because he has tens of millions of followers who also have Twitter addictions and are also in this childlike state. I was in Brazil during the last election, and I think a very similar thing is going on with Bolsonaro and his supporters. They have this, it's a very similar feeling. Is it true in other parts of the world? I think it's true in the Philippines with Duterte. Is it true with Modi? Yeah, a little bit. Is it true in China? In a funny way, kind of, yeah. It's hard to, the strongmen of China's past weren't trading weird little conspiracy theories and gotchas. It is different than it has been in China's history, not as much as it is different in the US. I was just in Turkey, Erdogan, that fits the model less well. I will say nothing about Israel. But the thing is, there is this difference. And so, because it's possible to overstate it. If somebody says, oh, humanity was perfect before social media, obviously that person is very foolish. On the other hand, to say that there's nothing different is also not true. There's definitely a shift. And the shift is that it's a kind of a wave of paranoia, narcissism, irritability, xenophobia. And it's somebody's pointing at somebody else in one of the frames. I don't know if there's an accusation taking place there.
So maybe I can jump in and ask,
Sure.
if I'm thinking about trust and safety, and we're looking at leadership in all kinds of regimes around the world, maybe we can go back to the beginnings of the internet, where it was a place for hope and maybe for connectivity. And now what we see is a sense of fragmentation that is growing and becoming more and more extreme, and also for self-radicalization, which is also a very important world. That see that people can follow, if it's Trump followers, they can only follow Trump. If it's Erdogan followers, they can only follow one version of reality without ever being confronted with a different side of reality. And they can get, it doesn't matter if you support one thing or another, you can just only see this filter bubble, or only get a sense of one kind of reality and never confront another kind of reality. And maybe this is something that the outer world brings you, and it's not safe, actually.
Well, okay, so you started out by asking about the origins of the internet. So unlike CAPTCHA, which I only know about, whatever I know is only secondhand and perhaps incorrect, I was there for the start of the internet. So in that one, I can speak as a first person participant and witness. And the origins of the internet are complex, and it wasn't entirely about hope. It was about hope in a sort of a techie countercultural world that cared about the internet, but there were some other things going on as well. The very first implementation of something you could experience on a screen that was connected to a digital network to other screens, before there was packet switching, before the technology of the internet, in the early 60s was actually implemented by B.F. Skinner, the famous behaviorist. And the intention was to create a behavioral control system for the world. It was an attitude that was a little bit more like what we think of from the Stasi in East Germany or something. It was like, we're going to have this thing that you interact with, and it's going to create this sense of normalization and control for the whole society. And that was considered an acceptable way to think. And that's just as much, and there's a long stream of things like that. In fact, some of the very earliest work with algorithms for interaction at all had to do with trying to exert control over people with behaviorist methods. So that strain of work goes back just as far as anything else. The story we tell ourselves about the internet is also true. The story we tell ourselves, of course, is that it was this idealistic, hopeful thing that was about personal empowerment and open information and all that. There were many people involved who also believed in that, but it's not the whole story. Some of you have probably heard me talk about the origins of the internet and then of the web, but there were, in my view, a few mistakes that happened that were quite cosmic in scale, and I always wonder if maybe somehow I could have screamed louder or done more to try to make things turn out differently. But one mistake was there was this very strong passion for what you might call socialism, that everything would be shared online, that the world of information would be a kibbutz, if I may. And so everybody would give, everybody would receive. There would be a collective sort of communitarian ideology. And that had started with the open software movement and many other things. And that was very strong. But at the same time, there was this really strong worship of tech entrepreneurs, like Steve Jobs as a primary example. But the thing is, entrepreneurs kind of exist in a world of markets, and that's a different world than this world of everything being shared. And so how do you reconcile those two things? And there's only one way, which is with the advertising model, which Google didn't invent it, but they were the first to really amplify it. And so the idea is that as far as the person interacting, it feels like everything's shared and it feels like they're giving and taking for free. But actually, there's this company becoming worth many billions of dollars in the background, and it's paid by these other people. And the product is the hope that those people have that they'll be able to change the behaviors of those people who are experiencing the free society. And you might say, well, isn't that just advertising? And it isn't. I mean, I'm personally kind of pro-advertising. I think advertising has helped bring about many of the benefits of modernity. But advertising was always a form of communication. And communication is different from behavior modification. In behavior modification, there are a couple of key differences. One is that you're in a continuous feedback loop. So you just do something online, and then the algorithm uses all the information from you to calculate the next thing you experience. And that tight information feedback loop has never existed before, except in the cages of, doves and other animals that people like B.F. Skinner played with, or Pavlov. That the feedback loop is really different. And the other is the information inequity, that if you're receiving in traditional advertising, the advertisement didn't know anything about you, so there wasn't really information superiority. It was just, it would say, here, buy my brand of cereal or something, and so there's a billboard or TV advertisement, but it doesn't know more about you than you know about it. So just in terms of information revelation, it's still a conversation among equals, even if the advertisement can be sent out many millions of times. Each of those transactions is still fundamentally between equals. But in this case, because of the accumulated information and the ability to use machine learning to predict human behavior and all, you're actually at a disadvantage when you interact with these things in a very crucial way. And so you're put in a very different role, a subservient one. And so both of those things distinguish this from advertising as we've known it before.
So actually, I'd like to ask a very down-to-earth question. You speak a lot about changing the paradigm and about how, especially in data dignity, for example, about us users being paid for our data. And I was wondering, how could it look like? How would it be? For example, if I'm doing capture for Google, would I get money for it? Would I get discount? Will I not see advertisement? How would it look like?
I think you should get paid for capture, because that's pretty specific work. There's another side to it too. In the history of industrialization, there was this guy named Deming. Do you guys know who that is? He was a really famous and important figure in the 20th century. I see a few people nodding their heads. So I'm embarrassed to say I'm forgetting his first name right now. But Deming was this guy who he worked on his theories between the wars, and then after the war, his ideas were adopted in Japan. And what he was saying is, if you're manufacturing something, like let's say you're making a car in a factory, and your attitude is that you have managers who tell the workers how to assemble the car, and the workers don't make any decisions. They don't know anything. There's just, how is it possible that the manager is going to really explain to the worker what matters when a car fails outside? It's like a stupid thing. It's a stupid information barrier. So what he was saying is, look, let's bring all the information about reliability, customer satisfaction, safety, any of the problems from out there, and actually have meetings and tell the people actually building the cars what's going on, and see if they have ideas about how to improve them. And what happened is, before that, Japan had a reputation for the worst quality in the world. It was always considered junk. And then they started adapting these practices and a whole bundle of things. There's also a bunch about statistical feedback and even building morale by singing songs together in the morning. There's like a whole package of things. But the thing is, after the Deming approach was adopted, Japan got a reputation as the highest quality manufacturer in the world. It like really worked. And that transformed the world because it created the development model for Asia and China, so it had this huge impact. Now, we're doing exactly what Japan did before it got good, right, with data and AI. We're saying, oh, you people who provide the data, you don't know anything. We're not going to tell you what we're doing. If you're doing CAPTCHA, you don't know how it's used. You don't know what's working. You don't know anything. And that's really stupid. Like, the better way to do things is to say, you know what? We have cars that are running into the side of the road, which is true. And like, what we need to do is we need to get a better example set, like under what situations look dangerous, like actually open it up so people know what they're doing. So we actually have I want to see if there's this thing from Microsoft that might even be announced. If it is announced, I'll tell you about it. And if it's not, I can't. There's so many things coming up I'd love to talk to you about.
We'd love to know what you're doing in Microsoft, by the way.
Just wait. All right, at the end of next month, you'll see a reconception of how to do video conferencing from Microsoft. I can't tell you about it yet, but the moment you'll see it, you say, oh yeah, that's got to be Jaren's thing. You'll know. It'll be in about a month.
Have you tried to onboard on Skype for Business recently?
Say again?
I asked you if you ever experienced onboarding on Skype for Business.
If you just look at me, you'll see that I'm a generally happy and healthy person, and so you should know the answer is no.
Okay.
No, I know it's terrible. Skype.
Yeah. So I think that we all hope for.
Take a look. Okay, take a look for something. It's called Trove, Trove, from the Microsoft Garage. It was announced today. And so it's out, so I can tell you about it. So it's a very early first experiment, and what it is it's a way for people who need data or example sets or even live interaction, all kinds of things eventually, to improve their machine learning algorithms, to actually go to people and explain what they need and have a dialogue. And then they also then the people can collectively bargain for a price for doing higher quality data. And so in our early experiments, we found something really interesting. Like, let's say you want to train a giant machine learning system, like it's supposed to be able to look at a cat and predict if that cat will like matzah, for instance. Okay, so you provide all of these examples. Now, where does the data set come from that you train the model with? Well, currently there are two practices. Either you get a bunch of what's called exhaust data, the free data that comes from a massive volume of users on like a platform like Google or any of the Facebook brands will have that. The problem with that is it's low quality data. It's garbage. You have to trim it back a lot and you have to struggle with it. Or you can pay a data broker to try to get you higher quality data, and then the costs just become astronomical. That's like too expensive. That's ridiculous. And even that isn't very good. We're trying to find this other spot. We actually communicate with the people respectfully, tell them, this is what we need. How much would you be willing to, how much you want to be paid? And we want them to form unions, essentially. We want them to collectively bargain so that they're not worrying too much about competing with each other and driving their wages down. But it has to be quality driven. This is not charity. They have to deliver enough value that it still is profitable for us to use them instead of the random exhaust data, because we can get plenty of exhaust data too. And it works. Like, you get this win-win-win where you have people who are getting paid, not a lot, but it's not trivial for a lot of people. It's enough to help. And you get better data, so you get better algorithms, and then you can sleep at night because you don't feel like a creep. And then also, there's also this other thing though that's really interesting, which is that people who understand that they've been valued and participate in having built something, instead of feeling like, oh, it's the distant AI that's going to rule the earth, they say, I'm proud of that. I contributed to that thing. And isn't that a better society? It's like a better way to do it. So we're starting to prototype how it would work. I think, so, I mean, there's a really interesting question, which is like, in the future, if there's a lot of algorithms and data and people are worried about employment because a lot of jobs have become obsolete, how much could paying for data account for building a society? I don't know, probably not 100% of it, but maybe a sizable chunk of it. I mean, that's something we need to discover. It would sort of look like a very expanded creative class, so you can start to see, yeah, you can start to see a little of how it'll look.
So that's already available. Like, if we go to if we search for Trove,
I just did a search on it and it came up, and it doesn't look to me like it's behind. And I did it. Yeah, I did it it should be out there. Just like look for Trove, Microsoft Garage. It should be announced today.
Okay, we'll go into afterwards.
And
okay, good.
It's just a baby step. It's just a little tiny baby step, but it's there. I haven't even, I actually haven't even looked at it. But take a look.
Yeah, so everybody's welcome to try Trove. I'd like to ask you another question for the creative class. Okay, you speak a lot about how we actually enabled ourselves to go bankrupt by giving all our talent for free, by becoming addicted to this model of no payment for anything, for content, technically. Many people are going to lose their jobs, and you're also asking, what kind of society is this, where people, have no economic value for their talent? Are we all just surface to take data from? Do you have any optimistic message for the creative people in the audience? What it is? No, because there are many artists and designers that listen to you now, and that have been studying your work and reading you. And sometimes, this insistence on let's call it, on opposing, on becoming, not becoming just an object, not becoming a gadget, feels a bit abstract. So I wanted to know if you have any message for the creative class, for the creative with us tonight. Even as a musician, as an artist.
It's a really good question. It's a really, really good question. I want to try to, the reason I'm hesitating is I don't want to just give you sort of the usual packaged inspirational thing. I want to try to think about your question as if I've never heard it before. I have heard it before, but I want to treat it as if I hadn't heard it. So I think the mission of the artist is gradually shifting. I think, like in the 20th century, I think the artist had this feeling of being a special person that was at the edge of discovery, that there was this kind of unfolding revelation, and the artist was at the edge of that revelation, a little bit like somebody at the edge of the sciences. And a lot of the artists that touched us were ones who really pushed at that edge and were doing something quite new and changing our sense of the world. I have this feeling that so far in the 21st century, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that that's not needed, but I wonder if something else is even more needed. I wonder if the world has this feeling of just losing its bearings, of going kind of nuts. And it's not exactly nuts in the way that it went nuts before. Like I was saying before, it's kind of nuts in a slightly new way, at least. It's becoming lost to narcissism and paranoia and irritabilities, and it's becoming kind of it's sort of contracting instead of expanding. It's becoming more trapped within the little theater of how people try to manipulate each other, which is a very small theater, but it's the one that we're becoming trapped in. And I feel as though the mission of the artist has shifted to be maybe a little less about pushing the edge of the boundary and revealing new things, and a little bit more about trying to stay attached to some sort of basic sanity and decency and kindness, just the most basic elements of being able to perceive reality in other people without extreme coloration and without extreme prejudice of one sort or another. Just this very, I almost feel as if we have to become like spiritual practitioners in a way that's different from before. Of like, like maybe the new form of art is helping people understand they actually look fine and they're not, you know, Instagram doesn't mean that they're suddenly, you know, worthless or something. Like it's almost like therapy. I feel like there's some kind of a reconnection of people to just the fundamentals of life and reality and each other that is very challenging right now. And I don't think that that was a mission of the arts in the 20th century or in earlier centuries. Maybe maybe to a degree, but so that's the thing I want to say.
There's a beautiful quote by Samuel Delany, who is a sci-fi writer, who says that it is for the artists, and I would add the designers or the creatives, to create the image of the future. And I think that maybe it is our responsibility to create an alternative, not to give up to the corporates or to the engineers and to functionality or all kind of needs to lead the way, but rather find aspects that are not easily monetized or easily explained or easily surrendered to the logic that is governing currently the market. And I think this is also essential for artists to create this alternative, but also to create it in a way that others would understand, to create this image that in a sense would be understandable, but also maintain some kind of a mystique.
You know, there's a kind of, I want to say something about, you said something about inventing the future, and it's nice to mention Samuel R. Delany, for those who don't know about him. There's a funny thing going on in the world now where the future has kind of disappeared. Like you don't see much in the way of public discourse about, you know, a future we could look forward to. What will a city look like? What will somebody look like? And that's quite distinct from earlier eras, and not just the 20th century with its post-war futurism, but even going back centuries before that, there was more talk about visions of the future and looking forward to the next century. Nobody talks about the 22nd century. It's like not even in discourse. There's no, a friend of mine named Neil Stevenson, who's a science fiction writer, had tried to assemble a collection of kind of optimistic science fiction and only semi-succeeded. I'm part of the problem. I failed to deliver a piece for him. But there's almost no sort of optimistic science fiction now. It's almost impossible to fund a science fiction movie or get a science fiction novel published that isn't fundamentally quite gloomy, even apocalyptic. It's just almost conceivable. And when you do try to say something positive about the future, you have to be prepared to deal with a lot of negativity. I've learned this through experience because, well, there's a lot of things going on. I mean, part of it is, this speaks to what you were just saying. There has been a tremendous lack of imagination about what the future might be in the last couple decades, kind of since the internet started. I think it made us so self-centered that we stopped thinking about the future. We're just like sort of more neurotically, you know, concerned about whether somebody thinks we're cool online or something. But there's, I mean, I'll tell you, you know, this question you asked about the role of the artist, I answered it many, many times when I was young and starting out, and I used to give a lot more talks than I have since then. In the 80s, I had a whole line about this, and I'll tell you what it is now. The role of the artist in the future is to create a human world of such seductive beauty and intrigue that it distracts humanity away from tendencies to self-suicide, you know, to mass suicide. Because the problem is that as technology increases, it becomes easier and easier for us to destroy ourselves in one way or another. And so the only way out of destruction is some kind of fascination with life. And some, you know, like life has to be fascinating enough to distract from darkness or to win over it. And so that's what art would be in the future. That was always my answer from before. The reason I thought to give you a different answer now is, I just think our times have become so peculiar. They've become very small in a way. I mean, our times are now mostly concentrated on very tiny, petty personal squabbles between people of whether this leader likes that leader, that sort of thing. And, or like who can get the best line in some kind of online insult exchange, that kind of, it's like very, very, we live in a much smaller world than we used to, at least that's my experience of it. There's a lot more to say. There's an important thing to say, which is about demographics, that in most of the rich world, including the US and China and most of Europe, there's just a very old population. And we're going to go through this weird crunch point, and that's going to have a huge effect on culture. There are places that are just the opposite. Nigeria is very young, for instance. So there's like a problem that the old world is really old. And that's so there's things like that. Like I don't want to pretend that the internet is everything and that there's only, there's a lot of different things going on in the world. And the thing about obviously one of the reasons that I've been so interested in trying to make data paid is that I want artists to be paid. Because I think this thing of defunding musicians that was supposed to be so glorious at the start of the internet age that a lot of people thought was this very enlightened thing was just horrible. And so I'd like to see artists funded and brought back into the fold of the normal society.
So there was a hand from the audience. Oh, yeah, I need help. I think it was Danny Rubinovich that raised his hand. Maybe we can take a question from the audience now. I'm just using my cell phone.
I'm happy to. Oh my God, I just looked at the chat. It's like huge. There's all these things with links.
And plenty of questions going on.
So Moni Naor is said to have laid the foundations for capture, and I'm assured he's a very nice person, which I don't doubt at all. All right, go ahead. Sorry, Ori.
Okay, so Danny, I just unmuted you. I think I'm using my cell phone, so I hope it works.
But maybe we can just like write the questions in the chat. It would be better for everybody, just to use the chat. We're just randomly going through the questions. Martin Mariansky is asking a question. The last ever photo on lobe.ai team shows you next to Mike Madas. Whatever happened to the team since they joined Microsoft?
That's low. I mean, they're still working. We can look it up. I thought they had shipped something. It's hard for me to keep up with all the different things. That's a kind of I like that group because they were trying to apply good user interface principles to where AI models come from, which I think is part of this project for me of, or this thing that I find very important of trying to make. I'm just looking at Lobe AI. I think it's still happening. There's a join beta option. Join their beta. Find out.
Romy, you have plenty of more questions.
Yeah, I know, but Danny wanted to ask a question and I unmuted him, so go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So thank you, Jaron. Very interesting presentation. And my question is, are we hung on sometimes on looking at symptoms rather than trying to find out what connects them? From the presentation today and some earlier thoughts, I started to look at perhaps part of what we're stuck with is the not rather than the yes. They do not rather than the do. And I start looking at different things. I try to look at intellectual content, and that seems to be shrinking. Reading loses significance. We don't have time. Everything happens fast. Answers have to be one-liners. And we react to stimulants rather than to any sort of content with any further depth. And there's a lot of name callings. There's a lot of things that are really non-doing rather than doing, or doing little rather than doing. Non-doing is the big concept. And I ask myself if that is where we're stuck. And if we're stuck there, then adding value by giving something that will sort of entice people or promote some thinking seems to be almost counterproductive. It seems to be that people are trying to ambush each other rather than to learn from one another. Mm-hmm. So are we aiming really at now, okay, giving a little bit of attention, a couple of seconds to technology. Technology to me, as an engineer if you want, is a toolbox with different tools to be used. And we start revering it, like that's a center, it makes us think. It's not there to make us think, it's there to serve us after we do the thinking. But we tend to put the cart in front of the horse on that one. So my question is, if you accept that as being sort of perhaps part of the bigger picture, where people like Trump can thrive, where scare tactics reign supreme, etc., then what answer can we give to it? How can we a little means other than being a big number if we all gather?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very central question. It's something I've thought a great deal about. I think there are a few things that can help. I think turning arts and intellectual activity and culture in general into this barter platform that serves the data gathering purposes for giant corporations is not the way to do it. I think that doesn't bring out the best in people, and that's what we have right now. I've thought a lot about what are the structures in human history that have brought about higher quality work and art. And I think there isn't any single answer, and different things seem to have worked in different situations and places in history. However, I think there's one thing that's very common, which is that if people are put into a situation where they're in a constant struggle with one another, where everyone is competing against everyone else, you tend to have a situation that's more like a brawl, and people don't really have the time or the space to develop high quality. They don't have the time to nurture themselves and to finish things, and everything becomes like very immediate and sort of small. And I think the way you get that is through groups of people working together to create bubbles for themselves, where they're a little insulated and can work on good things. And this is a sort of like punctuated equilibrium, I guess is what you could call it. I want to give you, I gave you one example of that actually, which was that the Japanese manufacturing, influenced by the Deming principles, had a little bit of that quality. But I want to give you a different one that might come from a surprising place. Do you know who Muhammad Yunus is from Bangladesh? So some of you are nodding your heads. He won a Nobel Prize some time ago for developing a thing called microlending for development. And the way it works is, let's say you have a very poor area in some place like Bangladesh, and a bank is thinking, well, could we give loans to these sort of people with tiny businesses and marketplaces to help them develop this whole area? And the answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is that how are you going to know who to, like, how can you possibly lend money when you don't know the people? And it would take an infinite amount of work to understand who you can lend money to. So the idea was very simple. You suggest that people form groups where they become responsible for each other's loans. And then that group is the thing that gets the loan. And the beautiful thing about that is that then the people have self-selected each other. So they've done the credit check. And so you've distributed the task of trust out into the society instead of having like this one central, beacon of trust from a bank. And then of course, the result has been great. Those loans get repaid. And so it's been good for the banks. It's been good for the people. It's another win-win thing. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is that suggests this very interesting idea that if people can work together and if you like sort of create a brand together or something, they can create a situation that works better than they can if they're each competing on their own. They can, but they can also create quality. So this gets to a concept called the MID, M-I-D. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot written about this. There's a piece in the Harvard Business Review, but they have it behind a paywall. I can send you a copy if you want to see it, I guess. The idea of this is that you'd have groups of people band together through free association. It would be through their own choice. Nobody would be forced. And they would form these organizations. We're calling them MIDs for the moment, which stands for mediator of individual data, or sometimes they're called data trusts or other things. And one of the things they do is the people kind of form a brand. So if somebody within them starts saying horrible things, they might get ejected because the people care about their collective reputation. They also come up with an agreement for benefit and risk sharing. So if one of the people in it, let's say they're artists and one of them has some giant hit and makes millions of dollars one year, they'd still benefit mostly from that, but they'd all agree to share to some degree so that they all have some minimum that comes in based on the totality of their success, because who knows who's going to be successful in a given year. So it becomes almost like a hedge against the fate, the uncertainty of what happens. There are a lot of existing law firms do this, lawyers do this together all the time. This isn't really a radical idea. But the interesting thing is that when you can create people who work together and can create a little bit of a bubble for each other so that they're protected from the constant need to compete every single day, and if they have some means where they're encouraging each other to achieve high quality results in some form, whatever that might be, in arts or science, then I think it's within that social institution that you see things become incredible. If you look at the history of the arts, you often find artists banding together to do this. You often find, and they're not like super official organizations, but they'll be there. That's why we have movements. That's why there were surrealists and cubists and minimalists and whatever. These movements were a way of artists creating a little bit of mutual support, but it also created, let's say, if somebody was a member of one of these movements and was just bad, the other ones would say that person doesn't represent us. Like there becomes a sort of a shared thing. And I think this idea of societal institutions is really where quality comes from. I think it's very hard for once in a while an individual can do it, but usually there has to be some kind of a cell, not just the DNA, if you like.
So maybe I can ask you about, actually I'd like to ask a question by Tzila, who wrote beautifully, and maybe we can connect the artist-run movements to what happens today with the corporates and especially with the big five. So I'm quoting Tzila's question that was asked here on the chat. Machines should empower us, not downgrade us. It's very known quotations of you. In the current state of things, is it still possible to change the course that big tech is leading us into? And if so, how?
Well, I mean, this is all a big experiment, of course. I think big tech has some, I mean, it's complicated because these things are as big as countries now, like Microsoft. So just, I have history at a few of them. I had a early history at Apple. I sold a company to Google, and then more recently I've been working with Microsoft. So I've been doing my tour of the companies, and you know, they're big. They're like it's complicated. You can't, I think there's hope. I think there's hope. You'll tend to see that the companies that are less centrally controlled are a little better behaved for the most part than the ones that are still controlled by a very small group of founders, because they start to have to listen to more different sources of information. So like I find Microsoft and Apple to be better than Google and Facebook and Amazon. That's based on a lot of things. But at any rate, I think part of it is just that they've sort of matured into being parts of society instead of their own things. They're more just, they're just not tightly held. The three that annoy me the most are still tightly held by a very tiny group of people. And very bad people. You know, I still, I still keep up sometimes with the Google founders. They're very nice, you know, but I think just intrinsically the structure itself creates the kind of power that does tend to really not be good for society. I don't think a company being big in itself is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's really more the particular company, how it's governed, how it's set up, and I think they can be improved. So I know your question is complex because it's about our relationship to machines, but you asked about big tech, so I've sort of focused on that part. I mean, it's a funny thing right now because, like, in the U.S., if I look at the large institutions in the U.S., some of the ones that are the least crazy, in my view, are actually, you know, the companies, which is really different. Like it used to be when I was growing up in the 60s, I thought the companies were these, and they were kind of like these ruthless, unconcerned profit machines, and the government protected people from the companies. And now it's kind of almost the reverse. It's almost like some of the big companies are protecting the people from the government, which has gone nuts. It's a very, very strange thing. I guess what I'd say is that we humans have a way of congregating that's stupid. We tend to create these big movements that are hard, like big political events that are horrible, and we tend to just do things in a dumb way. But the hope is that in our chaos, we also make some good ones along the way, and we just have to kind of work with whatever the best thing going is at a given time. And very weirdly, and by surprise to me, it seems like these corporations are sort of okay right now in a lot of cases. So it's kind of weird. It's a weird moment. Anyway, as far as this question about whether the machines degrade people or not, I will say I heard that there were a lot of AI and machine learning people in the audience. If that's so, you know, a lot of it has to come from the culture of the technologies. Oh, I see a dog. Maybe this is why my cat hasn't shown up. But anyway, the culture of AI has this way of demeaning people in its communications. I don't think it's intentional, because obviously I know a zillion AI researchers and I like them. But there's this way that there'll always be these headlines that are like, suddenly now there's a robot that can make pasta better than any person. Chefs will go out of work. And this will be like this headline at the end. I just made that one up. But there's always like something like that at the end of the news of some AI achievement, or at least in the US there is. And I think it just makes people feel like they're being left behind or made obsolete. And I don't think it really, it's not the right way to think about the technology. And I think it's, if the tech culture itself could try to communicate in a, just a less arrogant way, it might help a lot. You know, I think it's really worth trying. And there have been some improvements, I really have to say, but there's still a lot of that stuff. A lot of it in the US, it comes from Google and IBM, and to a degree from Facebook. Their AI labs tend to put out these messages that are just outright anti-human, and like, our machines will replace you, just give it up. And I just, oh my God, why are they doing it? And of course, the reason why is that the shareholders love it. Like, hell yeah, if you're going to take over society, I better invest in you. I'm not going to be left out of that train. So it actually kind of pays to talk that way, but oh geez, there's got to be some other way. Let me see, there's another question. Digital robber barons, have they gotten, oh God. So this is from Uri Aviv, about digital robber barons and whether they're becoming better or worse, and if it's too late. Well, I mean, here's the funny thing. Like, if you look, I mean, Google and Facebook make essentially all their money from people who think that paying them will influence what other people do. Amazon makes part of its money from renting out computer space and part of it from shipping stuff around. Apple makes all of its money from getting people to pay a premium on a high fashion digital thing. If you look at those business models directly affect sort of how creepy the companies become. So Microsoft and Apple are the least creepy. Amazon's in between, and Google and Facebook are the most creepy. I don't think that's really disputable, but you know, it's pretty clear. And it's not because of the people. It's the same people. People go back and forth between jobs at the different companies all the time. It's the business model. And so as far as hope, I mean, I don't know, you might, if you hate capitalism and you hate big corporations, then this will not soothe you. But, you know, Microsoft just doing what it does, which is selling goods and services, is actually bigger and doing better than the spying companies, Google and Facebook. And I think just at some point sanity might return. And so if Google and Facebook could turn into companies that just sold something, some kind of goods or service, and then paid people for the data and just expanded the economy through that exchange, I think they would just as a natural side effect become less creepy and more ethical. That would go together. Less exploitative business models create less exploitative cultures.
So we're just about to end, and
right.
Before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you a personal question. What it is that is on your desktop? Do you have a picture of or something?
You mean just like on my computer's desktop?
Yeah.
Because my actual desk has very interesting things on it.
Oh, we'd love to see that too.
And I'm using sort of a big monitor that's hard to turn, but my obsession in life is musical instruments. So I have all kinds of interesting ones. Here's a vertical.
We can see some at the back.
Here's I have to. It's a vertical bass flute, and then here's the vertical bass flute just hit a jazz. There's like all kinds of things everywhere. Anyway, so that's what's on my real desk. In terms of like my actual desk, I have so many windows, I never see it. Let me look. I mean, how would I know? I think I just keep it black actually, because I just feel like there's so much complexity. I just try to keep things simple these days, you know. So that's the answer.
Great. So Ori, to you.
So thanks, Romy. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for being with us. What we normally do is that since of this no space of no air at all, and you couldn't hear anybody, just like people through chat. So we're gonna open all mics and we're gonna clap our hands, everybody together, to thank you. And